And we are back on the 0 Hour with some bonus content for our Patreon subscribers with historian Kathleen Frydl. We've been talking a lot with Kathleen about the opioid crisis for this week's show, but we've also had her on to talk about the history of fascism and where Trumpismo might fit in that whole axis. So I want to get an update on the Trump fascism axis while we're at it and while you're here. So Kathleen, what do you think? You and I talked a few months ago about how historians were mistakenly comparing Trump, who would be a larval fascist at this point, with let's say, Hitler or Mussolini in their fully developed stage. And we talked about that, and it's not apples to apples. So now we've had several weeks. Somehow we've survived the 2 or 3 weeks of this guy as president, plus his pre-presidency. Where I've got a lot of strong feelings on this, but where do you think we are on this whole Are we on the road to fascism? Are people overhyping the problem? Do we not know yet? All of the above?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so first of all, thank you for having me on that many months ago to platform a discussion that at that point, very few people were willing to have, because to speak about fascism is almost to say a dirty word in our political discourse, in part for very good reasons, because people treat that history with a lot of reverence, and they should. But, because I'm from Eastern Europe and, my parents live there, I'm aware that, not just we should be comparing Donald Trump to nascent fascism in, Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany, but that we actually do have fascists that exist in Europe in parliamentary, parties. So I think we can call things fascist without predicting an authoritarian government coming tomorrow. And I have to say, it continues to be the lens through which I view Donald Trump. I think his attacks on an independent judiciary, his attack on the free press, anything that could be seen as an independent source of critique or authority, he is systematically attacked. One of the things I want to underscore, because I think I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about it, at the end of the piece I wrote on fascism, I made a remark about whether Trump was the culmination of what came before him or something that was so uniquely different. And that's been a discussion on the left about whether he's actually, the eventual culmination of a lot of things we've seen in the Republican Party, or he's some departure. And I happen to believe that he collects so many of the disturbing trends that he should be viewed as a special case, that there is something unholy about how he has embodied so many of the worst tendencies. But one of the things that I think clearly Donald Trump has capitalized on is this country's authoritarian move that has been made under the war on drugs and the war on terror. And we see every indication that he's going to escalate both dramatically.
Yeah. You touched on something that's really integral to my feelings about it, which is I think that both statements can be true.
Right.
I think that there can be things that are uniquely disturbing in American history about President Donald Trump, while at the same time, there can be things, you take that 13-point scale of fascism or whatever it is that people like to circulate now. Yes, Trump hits 9 or 10 of them, or seems it's potentially to hit 9 or 10 of them, but we were probably hitting 6 of them before he came along. So to me, I think you have to look at it with both eyes, for depth of vision. You have to look at it as, well, there's some things uniquely disturbing about this guy that are being amplified by Steve Bannon, for example, but there are also some things that are disturbing about trends in American history that he's also capitalizing on, because there are many ways, to me, he's not unique. There are many ways that other presidents have relied on fear. Other presidents have relied on, potentially on the Secret Service. Other presidents have denigrated the press. He takes some of them to new extremes. So I think it's a balancing act, because the other thing that concerns me, and I want your thoughts about that, is that I think that a lot of people are mythologizing themselves now. I think a lot of people are saying, I'm in the resistance. And, well, I met a couple of resistance people before they passed away. These were people who were willing to die. Or be tortured by the Nazis. Are you really, let's not bandy that word around too lately. I hold it kind of sacred. So, and it's also a way to say, well, I don't have to fight for an agenda for social and economic justice. Just by not supporting Trump, I'm a hero. So I guess I have that
Yep.
conflict too. But I've thrown a bunch of things out
No,
there.
I mean, so because I know I've worried, I'm sure you've worried too, that if we regard Trump as wholly distinct, and, appearing fully formed, out of the head of it, that we, in banishing him from our political life, which I hope will come sooner rather than later, we will have banished Trumpism. And I think you and I and many others would say, in fact, we have a very long way to go before we banish Trumpism from our midst. And there are certain things that he's done that have capitalized on pre-existing things. There are certain things that he's escalated. And there are certain things that become wholly disturbing by virtue of it being Trump that's now in control of it. Something like, many Americans were willing to accept drone strikes, and I frankly don't know why, because they don't have a real full it seems to me they don't have a full understanding of precedent and reciprocity. But many Americans were willing to accept drone strikes in principle and in practice under Barack Obama, and now all of a sudden are wholly terrified now that Donald Trump is president. Well, folks, I mean, that's the point of civil libertarians, is that we always hang out and expect that these powers will be used eventually in ways that are unacceptable.
Which shows a shortness of our historical memory. It amazes me that so many Democrats were okay with drone strikes, were okay with the NSA spying and so on, because they thought the president was a nice guy. It's like they didn't remember George W. Bush, much less Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. So now they may not be in people's lifetimes, but this is historically was yesterday. So it amazes me that people have been that way. And I'm hoping, here are my two scenarios, and tell me what you think. I mean, the good scenario is people realize that we can't continue on this crazy track anymore, and that the compromises people have made in the past really brought us to Trumpism.
Right.
Bad scenarios, people think that Trump is impeached or something. People think, oh, thank God we got rid of him, and we've got the corporate state with Mike Pence and the Republicans who have been voter suppressing and crushing democracy all around the country. Or we get, the centrists take over the Democratic Party and somehow, although I don't see how they can do it right now, get back into power, and we fail to address the underlying crises in our country, of which opioid crisis is one, in which inequality is perhaps reflected in things like the opioid crisis. So we agonize along while the planet destabilizes and we go to hell, basically.
Right.
So I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
I guess that's three scenarios.
But just as an aside, I mean, one of the things that I think about the opioid crisis is that it is the soft underbelly in the Democratic assault on Donald Trump. This is an issue that Democrats have not only failed to appreciate in its significance, they also stand gravely implicated in elements of the opioid crisis and how it was brought about. And there's a total lack of accountability within the Democratic Party about decisions that were made under Democratic administrations, including Bill Clinton's 1996, the FDA's approval of OxyContin in the very first place. So I think that there are points. People are regarding Donald Trump's first 3 weeks as a total failure, and now he has 40% approval rating. Let me tell you something. A well-distributed, I'm talking about a geographically distributed 40%, will beat a fractured Democratic Party that can't answer to the needs of its people throughout this country any day of the week.
And that's unfortunately where we are right now. And by the way, we'll close by saying Bill Clinton, who thought it would be a great idea if Donald Trump became the Republican nominee. So it can be too clever by half. But unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Kathleen Frydl, historian, as always, great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.